This is the SpaRetailer Podcast, where we talk retail, business, and all things related to the hot tub industry. I'm your host, Megan Kendrick, owner of SpaRetailer Magazine. Today on the SpaRetailer Podcast, I am so thrilled to have David Ingram, one of the early owners of Caldera Spas, on today. I've wanted to have him on for a while as part of the hot tub history series that we've been doing, because obviously Caldera has been around for a long time and one of the early pioneers in the industry. David, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm really excited.
Me too. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Before we dive fully into Caldera, could you tell me a little bit about your personal background? Where did you grow up and go to school and all of that fun stuff?
It's not very glamorous. I was out on my own when I was 16.
Okay.
Folks moved from California to Florida, and I chose not to go. And so therefore, I continued with my high school education and went on to some junior college. But along the way, I had an opportunity to work part-time at a company called FedMart, which ultimately became Price Club, that ultimately became Costco.
Okay, yeah.
Experience at a young age, driving a forklift at night, going to high school, stocking, that whole business, got involved in that. And then my work career morphed into those companies along the way. And I did not finish my college education, close, but life just moved on and I got involved in the hot tub business activity and instead of the mass merchant, because I thought allowed me more freedom and a lot less fear motivation there if you don't do the job right or the way they think it should be done.
Right.
You don't have a good feeling all the time when you come to work. So that's the early on. And then I got involved in, it was actually Custom Fiber Engineering, Inc., who had a couple spa molds.
Okay.
Spa molds actually were owned by a gentleman named John Rice, who did San Juan in-ground pools.
Right. So that is something that I recently learned about the beginnings of the hot tub industry, is that these molds, there were really only a few of them and they seemed to travel from company to company. It was really interesting. I didn't understand how that worked until I was talking to some people in the last year where it was like, no, not everyone didn't have their own mold or make their own mold. A lot of them got moved around. Is that right then?
There's some of that. Part of that is in those early years, some of these businesses were job shops. Like Custom Fiber Engineering ultimately became, as a DBA, Caldera Spas. They were doing van tops, ATV fenders, and John Rice said, hey, I need some spa molds to go along with my pools. So a commercial size square rectangle and a 10-foot round where he paid for the tooling. Those were really his models.
Okay.
So they were pretty limited in the business.
Sure.
From the retail side, the retailers or manufacturers who were selling product in like Jericho, Tradewind Spas, LA Spas, all of those companies are gone.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys started doing job shop work for, as example, say when Caldera Spa decided we were going to try to get into the business, I befriended a couple of those guys because they love to fish. I love to fish. So they really took me under their wing.
Really?
Oh, they did. And took me into their factory and said, this is how we do this. And we want you to build a good spa to protect our industry, even though I had some of my own manufacturing ideas. And one of my, he's early on, he was just a genius. His name was Ron Smith. And he knew some things that we could do that we wouldn't get some of the issues they were having. But
okay.
Molds did seem to move, partially because some of these businesses sold to each other. And the assets were missing when they closed, and it was pretty crazy in those days.
That is one of the reasons why I've been wanting to do this, why I've been doing this series on the history of the hot tub industry, because you're right. There are some wild stories from the beginning of this industry. And I just think it's so important for us to capture what happened, the truth of what happened, and some of the color and the characters from those early days. I don't want us to forget them.
That's admirable that you want to do the history because once we're all gone, then it'll be hard to recreate that.
Exactly. And our industry is still fairly young, all things considered. And so we still have the opportunity to talk to a lot of these early pioneers and founders in the industry. So trying to do that as fast as I can. So you were at the fiberglass shop and they start making shells for San Juan. How did it go from we're making molds for someone else to I think we want to get into this business for ourselves?
When I got involved, they were currently starting to tool a couple models that they could sell to San Juan, but would be their own tool. So let's just say that
Okay.
one that was very popular was a 7.5 round with a love seat. And that became the staple in the industry. I'm not sure who we copied it from. There was a lot of copying going on in those
Sure.
days. But the other thing that you could note is, have you heard of Baja Spas?
Of course. Yeah. They're out of Tucson.
They were really the first company to thermoform acrylic plastic into
Yeah.
a hot tub or into an in-ground spa. Bernie Burba and that crew,
Yeah.
they were really some of the true original portable and thermoforming acrylic spas. That was even before us. We were still gel coat and FRP. So where was the question going? I just
Oh, no, I was wondering how you went from making stuff for San Juan to doing it for yourself.
Part of that was I was invited to come in for these a couple other original owners and to invest money. And it was apparent after I was there a short period of time that they were really going to be bankrupt.
Okay.
They just really were. So I had some other assets that they'd asked me to sell and invest in that business. And I decided I could go back to where I came from, which was very lucrative at my age, and or stick it out, but I needed the control of the business. So that took, let's just say, 6 months of waiting for this to crumble further and further. But once that was resolved, with all the creditors, with the people that felt would be owed some money, then we set about internally to, okay, now how do we actually sell some of these, like those other businesses, like the Trade Winds, like the Cal Spa. It wasn't Cal Spa then, it was Cal Spa. No, it was Aqua Spa.
Okay.
Do it, Aqua Spa. And the other four or five, you can see they had lounges and they had rounds and they had all kinds of stuff. But even in those days early, most of this was all in ground. Yeah, it
Yeah.
hadn't converted to portable yet. So that's what we started. We made a 42-inch oval with a love seat, the big brother of the Aspen, the round, the 7.5. And then we did a rectangle spa and we just started from there. And the whole premise, and still to this day, one of the slogans is pure comfort. So the Caldera brand has always had and held and still is one of the most comfortable hot tubs because the guys that were doing the tooling, they were just master toolers. In fact,
Okay.
fathers were in that same kind of business from other engineering companies, and their fathers would come in and guide their sons and therefore the company. And we all benefited by that. So
Yes.
this sort of started to morph into that. And at that time, we were still doing gel coat and fiberglass, let's say for 4 or 5 years. Acrylic thermoforming now really came into play. And part of that was really started thermoforming more after Baja was the Watkins brothers. When they started Hot Spring Spas, which was 2 years later, their first product was a thermoformed all sides, bottom, interior. They call it the classic. The industry called it the dog dish,
Yes.
etc. But they were on the leading edge of where the industry would go. And
Yeah.
co-extruded material where they didn't have to use fiberglass. So they didn't have the issues with the APCD and the permits and all the scenarios. So it was, we all made fun of them. over here sleeping is Baja Spas. They've been doing that for a long time, but they
Yeah.
were reinforcing with fiberglass.
Okay.
Why did people change to that? Because they're in the early days, like boats, the spas were blistering. A certain percent of the spas blistered.
Right.
So Ron Smith, I won't use any other names, but specifically Ron and some of the material suppliers, we started using an ISO resin instead of a general purpose. And Ron, I just don't know where he got this knowledge, but he said, look at Dave, if we spray this on 3 millimeters or two as a clear coat, let it dry, then he would take a magnifying glass and he would look at it. And you could see microscopic small little holes of porosity.
Oh, really?
So he said, let's do a thin layer of fiberglass and let's check it again. And or another thin layer of resin. So his common sense approach was each of these layers that we would put on, you would fill the previous the holes, and then the next layer would have its own. So we almost totally eliminated blistering.
Okay. So it worked doing it that way.
It worked. However, we hung on to that process for quite a while. Primarily didn't have the capitalization to buy a thermoform machine and do the thermoform tools, because those tools are opposite of a gel coated fiberglass tool. So
Okay.
you can take the gel coat mold and build a new tool on top of it. That would be your thermoform mold. But all these things took money, and we needed sales, not just Dave's bank account. But that's how all that progressed.
Yeah. Did it take a lot of time to make them that way by doing multiple layers?
Yes, it took
Okay.
more time.
Okay.
As even the bigger fiberglass shops like Tradewinds and LA Spas, they had multiple fiberglass booths, just like they do in Watkins today down in Mexico.
Yeah.
Still using an FRP process. I don't believe I'm not sure what their multi-layer or whatever they're doing there, but their blistering is almost non-existent. Part of that is that the acrylic is almost totally impervious to moisture. So anything happen on the back doesn't have enough strength to penetrate in most cases. It does in those real thin spots,
Yeah.
in the footwells and the corners and things like
Yeah.
that.
That's so interesting. You've got this new product, you've got this new company that you have taken over or bought from the previous owners. How did you go out and find those sales? Did you start off selling direct? Did you go look for dealers? What was your strategy to start to get that cash flow and that capital?
At the factory in El Cajon, we had a retail store. So we tried to sell retail locally, but understanding math and margins, IMU versus gross margin. Oh, well, we're going to mark it up 20%. You're not getting a 20% gross margin. You have to divide your cost into your sale to figure out what that is. So we had a small store. Okay, so then, and this went on for some time. I bought a double-decker trailer where I could put like maybe a dozen shells, because that was the
Okay.
business on
Right.
that. And I had a pickup truck, and I created several routes, and I would leave and I would do the coastal route, call on a lot of hot tub dealers along the coast in those days, Orange County, LA County, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo. And I would go up that far. And then if I sold them all, I'd come home. If I didn't
Okay.
sell them all, I would then go over to the 99 and I would work up into Sacramento, Reno, Tahoe, and that would be the secondary loop. I didn't come home until they were sold.
Okay.
I
Okay.
reload that. That's not 100% true. There might be one left or two. It's out here 10 days. It's time to go home.
Yeah.
Plus, because people along the way were saying, I'd like that Sierra, but I want this color, blah, blah, blah. So I would call all that in, and then we reload that truck. And I also did the Tucson route. I would go Phoenix, Tucson, and Flagstaff, and try not to go much further east than Flagstaff,
Okay.
and then just go up like to Page, up into Salt Lake. And so that would be another loop.
About what year was this? I forget to ask you the details.
six. I'm going to say 80s, early 80s, or
Okay.
probably before that, because I bought that commercial property in 85 when the Black Friday stock crash
Yeah.
happened. Yeah, and that was a tremendous, crazy time because I had been putting substantial deposits to the owner, non-refundable, and I had my loan. And when that happened, Ford Motor Credit pulled my loan, and I literally had to go find just money anywhere. It's crazy. It was
Oh my goodness.
21% loan,
Wow.
which worked itself down to at the end to 5%, but nevertheless. So yeah, it was like early 80s is where
Okay.
doing that.
Okay.
I also did one summer and one winter run into Boise, Pocatello, Seattle, that area.
Okay. So you officially bought Caldera in, was it 79? Am I remembering that from what I've read? Or was it after that?
No, it's before
It
that.
was before that. Okay. Okay.
A little bit before.
Okay.
I would say got involved in maybe 77, not too much after they started, and then nothing really happened for a period of time. And then I was approached. There was a retailer in San Diego that went to them who knew me and said, hey, after they acquired the controlling interest, but not the stock, the guys that were there transferred their stock as far as voting rights to these guys.
Okay.
Then those guys came to me for the money.
Yeah.
They had some of their own, but
Sure.
they wanted me to help grow the manufacturing or whatever. And they were bankrupt. I don't want to tell the stories of how I knew all that, but there was a lot of drugs in those days.
Okay.
A
Got
lot,
it.
crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So what I did is that's probably 78, maybe a little before is when I finally got stipulations and judgments on against the company for all the creditors, payment plan, and figured out how much this guy wanted for his stock to buy it, not just the voting rights, so forth and so on. And so I ended up, it took about, by the time 78 was over, I was in total control.
Okay. That sounds like a stressful way to get into a business.
The alternative was to go back working for the big box. However, if I look back, they got a lot of money, they made a lot of money, got a lot of stock options, but I don't regret that. I've had a great life,
Yeah.
family, kids, grandkids. I like the idea of owning a business because I can surround myself with the best possible people that I can, but also ultimately be able to make decisions and
Yeah.
come and go as I please. So that's
Yeah.
what drove me to that.
Yeah. So when you were driving around and selling the shells on your routes, I mean, were there plenty of dealers to sell them to? It's interesting talking to people because it feels like this industry is brand new. No one really knows what a hot tub is. And yet it seems like it caught on really fast too. It just seemed like, from what I've heard from other people, that it's had this period where it just took off and there were dealers popping up and down the street in some places.
Yeah, like Beach Boulevard in Orange County or San,
Yes.
that turned into the Spa Row.
Yes. I've heard of Beach Boulevard.
Most of those locations were really owned by the manufacturers.
Okay.
Meaning, what I was focusing on were pool builders because
Got it.
pool builders were now had an option to have a nice hot tub that could heat up in a reasonable period of time that was comfortable, that had multiple jets. Whereas a gunite spa was 90-degree angles, half a dozen jets, took a lot to heat that. It was 300 or 400 or 500 gallons of water in that
Right.
adjacent spa. And then not everybody wanted a pool. So that's a lot of the early contacts and sales were people that were in the pool business,
Sure.
focused on that. And then where the dealers were far away, like one of my very first and best dealers, Sequoia Spas in Tucson,
Yeah.
Peter Marintet and family. So I would call Peter up and say, I need some orders. And he would say, okay, I'll take this and this. And I said, okay, send me the money too. So we became friends and we went hunting together. But he was a sort of a sideline financier of the early company in the early days.
Yeah. He must have really believed in the product in hot tubs for one, but also in you and what you were doing.
We drank a lot together. So
That doesn't hurt.
yeah, you can find a drinking partner at by three in the afternoon every day that, you're making, not maybe the best friend, but
Oh man.
but Peter was, there was a number of those fellas that really, Damon and I just saw him, the guys out of Spas East, which is no longer the business, the two partners there, they would do the same thing.
Okay.
Dave Centurino, he's still in the business. Dave Centurino, and then his old partner. So I had a couple of those places at why East Coast? I had Wyoming and Michigan and places because I'm a very early riser. And so
Okay.
I'm up by 5 a.m. So they could do business with me when they came to work at 8 o'clock. Nobody else was doing that in those days.
Yeah, for sure.
So that helped us open some doors.
Okay.
So those travels, though, the people that I was delivering to were started talking about portable spas. So that was the start of the transition.
Okay.
Was out there, Hot Springs Watkins was out there
Okay.
promoting different models, etc. But plug and play. Watkins and Baja, they coined that plug and play, put it in, plug it in. White's perfect. It's like your refrigerator, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they really set the tone for the industry for sure.
Yeah. And so your customers started to say, "Hey, I see what those guys are doing. Can you make me one of those?"
Exactly. So ours was pretty crude in the beginning. It was a redwood frame with a 2x6 top rail, and you put
Okay.
it together, and you had a platform for it to sit under. And then it morphed into a frame, and then a expensive frame, and then a tray pan, and then the panels, and just morphed into what it is today. But
Yeah. When
long
you when you were doing that, were you still doing the fiberglass or did you move to acrylic or yet at that point when you started making them portable?
we were still doing FRP,
Okay.
fiberglass. I
Okay.
don't know the exact date that we changed, but again, there, Ronnie, who was doing all the brain work, we said, look at Dave, if we just get a vacuum form machine, it's what I need. I'll build the tools. We have the capability, it'll take time. This space isn't big enough. We can rent another space and I'll make the carriers to take the fiberglass, the acrylic shells, and be able to stack them in the carrier and put them on a flatbed and bring them to where we were going to reinforce them. So it was a process. It was exciting times.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
were we thought we were big shit stuff.
How much would a vacuum corner how much would the vacuum former have cost back then?
About 15 to 20,000.
Okay, yeah, that's substantial when you're a new business for sure.
And there a lot of the guys in the industry that hung on to FRP, they just weren't successful enough to get into acrylic. And some of those companies faded away. And then some of those companies were going over to competitors that had thermoform machines, and now they were buying thermoformed skins,
Yes.
their molds,
Yes.
et cetera, et cetera. So there was a lot of good respect to each other. There was one person that was a pretty crazy guy. He spliced, that's the term. He spliced everybody's designs. But the first building I moved in, the real building, he built that. He built that space. He built the chopper booths and that.
Okay.
But faltered. So that became available. So I went and got it. And he came to me and said, look, I'm going to get back into business, but I want you to know I'm never going to splice your designs. And
Okay.
I said, Chuck, why would you do that? And he said, because I think you're one of the most honest guys in this business. And we're all really cesspool dudes. I mean, we do anything to survive or beat our partner and
Yeah.
competitor I met.
Yeah.
I literally,
It's funny because on the one hand, you talk about how you guys were all these early hot tub manufacturers. You're kind of in it together. You helped each other out, but at the same time, you still were cutthroat. There was like this weird balance of we're friends, but I will also try to eat your lunch.
I think my personality is one. I might think that and I might talk that way really privately, but my outward demeanor has always been pretty calm.
Yeah.
I can say this, and I tell all my kids and grandkids, maintain your reputation so that someday, if you have a business you started and you want to sell it, that will be the high point of their Ben Franklin clothes. A lot of the opportunity that was presented to us, I know I'm deviating maybe from your questions, but we were a clean business,
Yeah.
clean, very profitable, very expensive. Our spas are probably the most expensive spas in the market because I knew the difference. You got to make money. And I want to have a lifestyle, my employees too. And they all worked hard. We got more done with less people, but we paid them.
You mentioned your kids and grandkids. While you were building this business and driving all over the country, did you have a family? That would have been pretty hard to balance, I would imagine.
It was difficult, but when the kids got a little older, like 8, 9, so whether it's Little League, church that we made them go to, stuff like that, I was present. I still love to drive. I still to this day, I drive home. I'll drive home to Durango tomorrow, and I'll probably be back here in a week.
Okay.
Then I'll go down to San Diego, see Aaron, stop on the way to see Scott and Shelley Clark in Vegas.
Right.
I probably put 50, 60,000 miles a year on my truck,
Okay.
but I can always be on the phone. I'm a phoner. So it's in a perfect world. Maybe I tease my wife. I could have went to work at Chevron, at the gas station with a brown bag every day, and be home on the weekends. That just
Yep. Yep. Yeah, we all make those trade-offs, and a lot of times it's for the benefit of our family too.
yes. I probably didn't even know what the word balance meant.
That is a newer thing that we talk about.
I just knew that next week the payroll was, let's say, 10,000, and when we got near the end, the payroll was 200,000 every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I never missed the payroll. I never missed paying taxes or payroll taxes. But the credit goes to everybody that worked there.
Yeah.
Really,
Absolutely.
I didn't build them. I didn't load them. I didn't ship them. I didn't design them. But just collectively, we all had the same mission. We are going to be one of the top companies, top quality, and we can do it. My responsibility was to make sure we had money, and I did that. I had and get a SBA loan, then I'd pay it off. And then when I bought the property, the dollar amount doesn't matter, but it was the most expensive property sold in El Cajon per square foot ever. Everybody,
Ever?
ever. Everybody thought I was nuts.
It does sound a little nuts.
It was those 3 buildings on the corner of Bradley and Marshall. The key people along the way, when I sold the business to Watkins, everybody got a piece.
Yeah.
All the key players. And then the people that have been there as good employees, everybody got a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've just been really fortunate, but honesty, loyalty, commitment, not just to the business, but to your family, my family. I always, my feeling is I need to take care of my family, my employees, and I'm not in the spa business for selling spas. We're in the spa business to buy real estate. So that's what we've done.
Okay. Okay.
It's a vehicle, a good vehicle, if run properly, to be able to acquire the buildings we're in, something that's more affordable, build something. So to me, it was always, and our whole family's that way. Whether it doesn't matter who it is in the family that's in
Yeah.
real estate is always on our mind, or
Yeah.
acquisition.
I've said this on the podcast before, and as I have talked to more business owners as they're selling their companies or as they're working on their succession plan, I've realized like how important the real estate piece of that is. And so many of the most successful retailers I know are the ones who have the most lucrative exits from their business. It's because the real estate was part of that deal. Banks like those tangible assets, right?
Yeah, there was conversation with Masco, and but they wanted the property, and I wouldn't sell the property. They could have the business, they could lease from me, they can move, but I wasn't selling the property.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm glad I didn't.
I want to go back a little bit to Caldera being known for comfort. What was it in those early days that made you guys latch onto that or see that as something that's really important to your brand? And obviously Ron and how he helped engineer and create the seats. I mean, why did that become a sticking point for you guys?
Because the people we hired, I hired the Ohio State gal. She was a marketing girl, and she came in and she was creative. So with her talking to Ron about, I put these jets here so that you could do this and do this. She created this. Well, and we didn't even know about wellness then.
Sure. Yeah.
So created pure comfort and the circuit therapy. Today, they still use the term circuit therapy. There's a person and the jets and all that stuff in their marketing. I played a role in it because we talked about it, but I can't take the credit
Yeah.
for it. And then I think it was in 92, I was ready not to work a lot. So I ran some ads in Wall Street Journal and USA Today, and we had 300 applicants. Then I hired a company to sift through those. And the fellow I hired was a working graduate. He was the mergers and acquisitions VP, senior VP for South America.
Okay.
So he came with a lot of credentials.
Yeah, I would say
For,
so.
for a little company, he really transformed us into a profit machine.
Okay. So what position did you hire him for? Was he coming in as like the CEO or the
Yeah,
president to take your place so you could step back from some of the daily stuff?
I heard him as the CFO.
Got it.
He was good. He had great
Hmm.
experience. He was organized. He knew how to teach. He knew examples. We would have monthly, we'd have biweekly meetings for production and then meetings for the county department. And I'll never forget, he went out and bought like 50 books. It's called Profit is Free. And that book, he made everybody read it, and we talked about it. Who was our customer? Our customer for everybody isn't really the customer, the person we're selling it to. The guy on the line building the plumbing, his customer is the guy over there doing the harnessing. He's the harnesses customer. Now he puts it into plumbing. That gets passed to the next. So he created this environment of employees saying, hey, I'm not moving. This spa's not going down the line. It's not going down the line because it's not right.
Yeah.
So places for these spas that pull off the line, instead of trying to fix it and move it down, he didn't want that kind of process. He wanted it checked and rechecked. So when it got to the spa to put it together, the cabinet, the framing, and everything, it was right. And so the assemblers had to do their job because that's what went to the customer, the final product.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a transformation of the company, and we had distribution centers, which were also serving at one time as retail centers. Seattle, Portland, Tracy, Phoenix, San Diego, etc. Locations where we could store inventory. And he eliminated all that overhead. And let's say we had 10,000 SKUs, he cut 5,000.
Okay.
Made, made everything more streamlined. Anyway, a lot of credit to a lot of people, and I learned a lot, and he was pretty instrumental. He had a lot to work with, though. He had a committed team. He already had facility, he had manufacturing. It wasn't like he had to start from the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned Black Friday and having to pivot and find a different loan in the final hour there, but Were there moments in those early years of starting the company where you were just like, what have I gotten myself into?
Yes. Yeah, I didn't have to say it. I had somebody over here talking to me. You do everything. Now you're gonna go get some more money against the house, or you're gonna borrow money, or you're gonna do SBA loan. Yeah, all the time,
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
But I never waited. I would give myself a little credit in this area. I could foresee that when we got to this point, we had stripped our cash based on what I felt we would increase the business. It takes money to do that.
Yeah.
So the forward thinking planning for financial, I think I did a good job with that. And that kept us there for 30 years or whatever it was, and Watkins now for another 20. So
Yeah.
to make it 50 years, it's a long time.
Yeah. So likewise, when you think back, are there some moments that were really big turning points where it was this was the thing or this was, the moment that kind of took you to that next level?
Before the hiring of the COO, CFO, what did help us immensely is my relationship with Costco Price Club. They wanted us to sell them product. So we said, okay, we'll try this. At the time, they had Jacuzzi brand in there. So I had to do a better job than Jacuzzi. So
Okay.
in store, we put a spa with a gazebo. You take a paper and you go to the front, you buy it, and so forth. We got started with that, and then we weren't selling anything. So I went and bought like 8 of those kits.
Okay.
We just did a roadshow just recently that I told my team, go in there and buy some spas. Go buy a cold plunge, etc. It'll all come back to us. And so what we lose, of course, is their margin and the sales tax. But
Yeah.
you don't have to pay for those spaces. So it's an investment anyway. I smile about it. But so we got like all the West Coast, like 25 Costco's to put this, and they bought the product. So that helped. That was a big boom, to get
Oh, yeah.
25 gazebo orders and 25 hot tub orders.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then that window moved into the road shows. And we ultimately in the day, we were doing approximately 100 shows, 10-day events
Okay.
annually. So we had these vans, box vans. I bought box vans with Mercedes labels. They were Mercedes trucks, so they look cool.
Sure.
We put three or four spas and 2 gazebos in, and the driver was the salesman. And we had a schedule, like 10 stores in the Phoenix, Tucson area. And that guy would drive to each store, and they'd help him unload, he'd set up, he'd sell, get back in the truck and go to the next place.
So
So
were you guys the first Costco roadshow people?
for hot tubs, yes.
It just seems like you kind of had some really good instincts there as far as the real estate that you found, some of the early moves that you made, and even like capitalizing on that past relationship with Costco all seemed to play in your favor.
It did. The Costco really did, because doing 100 events in those days across the sound there in Seattle, one event there we did 80 hot tubs. It's crazy in those days.
We should mention, like, you are still in the business and still helping out and working with your family who's in the business still.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Tigers and my son were friends. And we just have a look. We look at each other, we have a look, because my son passed away,
Okay.
and they were friends. So a lot of this that I still do is because I miss my son.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's the family business. It's a way to carry forward, move his legacy forward too.
we all miss him.
As you moved into the time where you were looking at selling to Watkins, were you kind of ready to be done with manufacturing at that point? I know you guys had a deal and then it was put on hold and then they came back to you. What was the reason that you were considering selling?
Quite honestly, because I had all my kids, we met. We usually meet a couple times a year, and I said, "Look at Dad's. I don't want to have to be. I don't want to be tied to this. I need some more time on myself and etc. And I think it's time. The company's profitable, etc. So who wants to work in the business and run the business and keep the business? Nobody. When the kids finished college, when they started to work for the company, they realized that could make more money as a rep.
Sure.
Okay, not with good base pay. All the reps were our employees. We didn't
Okay.
independent reps had 20 lines. No.
Yeah.
So we had, I don't know, a dozen employees that sold only our product. So they got a base pay and travel, let's say 75 grand a year, which wasn't bad,
Mm.
plus 5% commission. So my daughter, who got a degree in finance, Shelley, I thought, wow, this is cool. She'll take care of that side. And then Jason finished up, he was in marketing. And I said, man, we got this thing dialed in. So
Yeah.
so she started working for the company for a little bit. And she goes, I don't want to, I live in the Bay Area. That's my territory. I don't want to live back in San Diego. And I don't want to work at the factory. My family wasn't interested. We talked and I talked to the kids and then we talked to Watkins and the rest is history. About it, it took time and
Yeah. Were there other manufacturers you would have considered selling to, or was that really your target, Watkins?
nobody had the money they had. They,
Yeah.
Masco supports them. You know, I like to tell the story, and they have POP for the stores, but Masco owns Bear Paint, Delta Faucet, and 60 other businesses. So the engineering that they have just with Delta Faucet, we could send them a little drawing like this, and they'll take that and they'll make a little clay model out of it. They just have it, they have it. So the support to a Watkins, a Bear Paint, it's uncanny what their resources are. It was them or I would keep the business. It didn't go out to finance groups or anything you're interested in buying.
I talked to Steve Hammock about this when he was on the podcast. It blows my mind that Watkins has been part of Masco for so long. That's just not. Masco has bought and sold a lot of other companies and brands that have been under their umbrella. But for Watkins to stay as one of their core businesses for all these years of a publicly traded company like that, it's really remarkable.
It is. And I have an opinion of that. And that is that we are not Home Depot related. We are not related to the construction business. We
Sure.
got their door business, their cabinet business, and they buy a lot of those businesses along the way. Door businesses, cabinet businesses, insulation, paint. The president from Watkins just went to Bear Paint as the new president.
Yeah, he did.
But they're so construction, Home Depot, the economy, housing goes, they go. So this is one segment that is affected by the economy and interest rates to some degree, but it's more consumer orientated, whether it's a direct sale on the internet. So I think that this is out of their core business.
What did you envision your life looking like when you sold the company? Did you see yourself staying in the business? Did you see yourself retiring and doing something completely different? What were your aspirations when that deal was signed on the dotted line?
They asked me to help work with them for about a year. And that was
Sure.
to try to keep all the people, the criticisms, that I was still available. They wanted me to have a prenup. I'm not a prenup, Jesus Christ.
I don't know. I kind of like prenup. I think that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, I need one.
Yeah.
But anyway, so a non-compete for a
There you
year
go. Okay.
because they weren't afraid. Maybe it was 3 years. I don't know. But they really weren't afraid of anybody going back into business. They didn't want to have somebody come along and sue them. You're impeding my this and this. I wasn't ready to retire. However, I did play quite a bit of golf after that. I fished after that, but I got involved with a rep company, WEK out of Texas.
Sure. I know them.
I helped them help develop the barbecue line Saber, which is no longer, but I also was working with Magic Plastics and a few others.
Yeah.
Because of toot my own horn, my reputation, every manufacturer allowed me to come in their business. The engineer from Sundance Jacuzzi, be it Bullfrog, I was welcome to come in. What they wanted me to do, obviously, is tell them everything I knew about manufacturing from the Caldera and Watkins. And I made
Sure.
it that I really couldn't share some of those things, but I might be able to give them some suggestions of throughput. Some of them I said, you need to do a better job of your inventory control. You have too much, things like that.
I asked someone the other day, it's like, when do I get to the point where my job can just be consulting people and being on boards? That's my new career aspiration is just to be on people's boards and do some consulting and just help them out when they need it. Get a little money on the side.
And it was like that. I
Yeah.
guess I was on a couple boards, but I never said I was on a board because that kind of would take me away from the opportunity of doing even a couple of the Canadian companies. But then I really got bored. So that's why we opened the first. The kids had the stores, Jason's stores. Shelly had some stores. They bought these people out in Santa Cruz
Yeah.
and the Vegas thing. And I don't know why they only call me when they want something.
I'm sure that's not true.
So I just got involved in Durango. I wanted to open a store. So I went to who would be a competitor there, who had been in business 14, 15 years, Sundance. He was Sundance and then got Jacuzzi, but nevertheless. So I went to Mark a couple times and I said, look, you want to be a business together? And I said, look, I'll give you 49%. I'll take care of all the money. Now, why would you turn that down?
Yeah.
And so we started Durango Outdoor Living, and they've done extremely well with those brands. What he's learned from there, he's done a better job at the Four Corners store.
Sure.
I opened that store from scratch. And then Matt was talking to me about, say, this corridor out here in Utah.
Yeah.
So I flew over, and at that point, I signed a lease, ordered 6 truckloads, and I brought one of Scott's sons down here. He still works for us. Anyway, so here we are.
Man, you serial entrepreneurs, you just can never quit. I feel like it's funny the number of people that I've seen retire and then come back and then retire and then come back.
Part of this over here was the growth here is phenomenal. Now
Yeah.
there's dealers here, it's a lot of competition, but again, real estate. So we were able to do something here, and a partner and I, we have the building's 32,000 square feet, and we each took 7. He took 15, I took 7. No, we each took 7. Anyway, we're the tenants, and we have tenants.
I'm curious, you've had a lot of different partners over the years. And I don't know, I like having a partnership is scary to me because you lose some control. What if we don't agree? And all, how have you managed that to have so many successful partnerships over the years?
51%.
You just make sure that you get the final say.
There's one event that I didn't. I took the 49. That didn't turn out well.
Okay. As simple as that.
Simple as that.
I actually have family in Durango as well, which is funny.
Really?
Yeah, my grandparents lived in Bayfield until the end of their lives, and I have an aunt and uncle who still live there. So I've been to Durango many a time.
Yeah, Bayfields, that's a beautiful area. You get off the highway there, it's a lot of farmland and it's so peaceful there.
Yeah. My grandpa developed a lot of those properties and area around Vicita Lake.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what he did. Well, David, is there anything that we have not touched on that you think is important in your story about Caldera's story? 50 years is nothing to sneeze at. It's a big anniversary for them and for you.
Yeah, it's a big anniversary. I couldn't be prouder of all the people from the beginning, in the middle, and to the end.
Yeah.
Helped me get Caldera where it was as a Class A company that somebody as magnificent as Masco would consider bringing us into their stable. And to still look back at Pure Comfort, Circuit Therapy, some of the ways they do things in the equipment were our patents, and they still use those today. So to see that there's the improvement in a lot of things, the cabinets are, what I notice a lot is the cabinets are just way beyond my vision, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they've done such a great job. They've done such a wonderful job. So I'm glad it got passed off to them, closing to that.
Thank you so much for doing this. I'm so glad that we finally had the chance to connect and to learn about getting Caldera off the ground. It was really a pleasure. So I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right. Good luck.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, David.
I'll look forward to seeing you in the boardroom.
Yeah, there you go. Fingers crossed.
The Spa Retailer Podcast is a production of Spa Retailer Magazine. Let us know what you think by leaving a review or emailing us at podcast@sparetailer.com. Thanks for listening.